So, greetings, ladies and gentle players. It's whatever day I happen to upload this onto the YouTubes, and that probably makes it a wonderful day for learning Joseki. That's right. Oh, and in 2024, mind you. So today we are going to be going over Joseki. We're learned Joseki. What Joseki do we need to know in 2024? It's a question that keeps coming up over and over and over again. And even though I suspect almost everyone who watches this video will be able to predict most of the sequences, in case you're one of the few people who can't, you're gonna learn something here. Just like if you go over to my Patreon, you can probably learn that you can support my content while getting cool stuff for yourself. You can throw me games to review every month, can play in my simuls, you can join my group classes. Can't do full-time students right now. They're all sold out, unfortunately. Got spots for sponsors as well as oil tycoons if they want to throw $2,000 at me a month. Essentially, I've got things for everyone. Thank you, as always, to my patrons who make all of these lovely videos possible. All right. So first thing we're gonna do, simplest ones, and everyone should be able to know what we're going to see with the 4-4. Let's get a decent board position here first. Let's not tell tales out of school, as it were. Simple opening. 4-4s versus 4-4 and 3-4. Very, very common opening. And in the opening, there are things that you might see. Wait, we need black to move. Okay, black's going to win close. Yeah, black's going to win close. Great. You might see an approach. What happens to you approach? Technically, you could Tanuki and play elsewhere. You can do that because there are a whole bunch of double approach Joseki. However, they're not the most common. And there's also something that's very much in your control. If you don't want to play a double approach Joseki, don't Tanuki and you don't have to do it. Okay, great. You're probably going to back off, take territory. Your opponent now will attach. Once upon a time, they would play here. More on that in a minute. Instead, you're going to get attachment. Attach is the most common thing that we can see nowadays. For that, it's very simple. You Hane, they're going to Hane back, and then you make a choice. Do I want influence in Sente, like we see here? If so, fantastic, congratulations. Now you can go and do other things. If you're like, no, I want influence or I don't want influence right now because maybe there's other stuff on the board and you don't think you can use it very effectively. Like maybe, I don't know how this would happen. Shut up. I'm going to try to make something that makes sense here. That makes sense, right? Yeah, sure. Something like this. So you don't know how the influence is going to work. So we don't want to Atari and get a wall because our opponent's already there. Okay, fine, no problem. You can just go and get territory. Ah, crap, I need whites to move again. Okay. This is a very hard board to set up, how you would not want influence. But sure. There you go. You played here instead. Now you're fine. Now you're fine. You settle, you keep some corner stuff. You don't have to worry about the influence if you don't want to. You're fine. Normally, you're probably taking the influence. And for that, you just go ahead and Atari, and you're golden, is what I would normally say. Most people who play this sequence as white over this sequence, more on this later, do so because they do so believing the Joseki sequence has ended. It has not ended right now. Because what has white gotten for themselves? They've gotten about 6 points for themselves. What they want to do later, and this is very, very important, is to take the cut here and get more points for themselves. So if you are playing this sequence, the timing of A is going to be very, very important. That way, rather than just giving your opponent influence in Sente, which is a crazy freaking idea to do, you can take some territory to kind of counterbalance whatever they're building with the wall that you just gave them. However, if you take it too early, it's not worth the points you're getting. If you do it too late, then our lovely, adorable black player here can take B for themselves and then get influence and the territory, and then white's just kind of feeling very, very unfortunate. And there's more. Not only do you have to keep all of that in mind, you also have to keep in mind what happens if, hypothetically, black pushes. What do you do then? What do you do then, chat? What happens if black pushes? What do you answer with? Does anybody even know? Because the most obvious move, you gave your opponent influence. What if they want more? Yeah, M16 is the problem. Because the M16 gets a cutting point. The cutting point gets an Atari into an extend into a whole bunch of really, really fun things. This right now, well, we're dying in the corner, so we need to live there. And that gives black a follow-up sequence. And this is now the Joseki. Good job. But is it really over? I mean, you don't want black to keep extending from here, right? This little Z is in trouble. So maybe you need to answer this too? It's a whole thing. We're now at about a 40 move sequence from the upper right attachment. That is complicated. That complication has complication. So it is not a simple sequence to do by any stretch of the imagination. Now, some of you would say, I would play here instead. Your opponent will likely follow you. And they'll follow you because double Haunted out of 2 and 3 stones, right? Fully surrounding the upper right-hand corner is fantastic. Now we have influence, we have influence on the right. We have influence on the top. We have influence everywhere. Pretty good for an opening corner, don't you think? Now, you might be thinking to yourself, it's fine. Those sequences will be better than just playing an old sequence like this. Well, that's an interesting... That is a very, very interesting idea. Absolutely interesting idea. But is it true? Let's find out. Cat Train, what do you think? Is that right? Is this just better? Wait, how do I open the board? Oh yeah, right. Let's get the whole thing here. Then we're doing this. Nope, sorry. I can close. Thank you. I know what I played. And then, clear enough, we can see, yeah, sure, that's a top move. That's a top move from the AI. Absolutely. Attachment. But how bad is this small knight really? Well, let's find out. Okay, it loses you 0.3 points. And there is the question for you. And there is the question you have to ask yourself. Do you want to play this, and then all of these variations, there's this variation, there's this variation, there's this variation, and then potentially play all of these lovely follow-ups? Do you want to do all of that? Or do you just want to take the 0.3? Let the AI think about more? So you think this is going to radically change? Okay, let's find out. Okay. That right there is about, let's see, how many variations do we have on the board right now? 5,000, 10,000, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. There's 20,000, sorry, 20,000, 21,000? So it's roughly 21,000 variations. 20,000 variations here, right? Only 0.3. You can play practically everywhere, but you probably want to play a move that actually settles you to avoid complication. Because when you're picking Joseki, it's all about current complication and future complication. If you play away, the stone doesn't have a base, it's not settled, it can be attacked. So if we're looking to find a simple move that settles you, you can play this, but there will be a lot of complication here because you don't know how your opponent's going to play. You don't know how your opponent's going to follow up. And as we've seen, there's a lot of extra things to consider here, right? If you don't want to do that, you 100% can still just play the old thing. You can still play the old thing. Let's try to bring max yes, if you're trying to bring max complications, one, you shouldn't be. But yes, you absolutely can. Just know you will get the continuations wrong unless you're a professional player. That's just fundamentally true. If you want something nice and simple and solid to play, this move is still completely A-okay. So saith the AI. Not me, not my opinion. You can see it in green right in front of you. All right, let's continue on. So we have that, and we've talked about this now. That's an easy way to settle. Easily. I'm going to change this slightly since we're on the topic, because they can also approach from the inside. And then you can back off. They can do this again. Now, one thing I will recommend here, personally, is taking the territory variation. The reason why is because the extend up is normal Joseki sequence. Because after that, there's this one, after that, there's this one, and then there's a fight here. However, keep in mind the whole board. You could just play something like this to get an enclosure and extension, and then have them worry about this later. That's just my personal preference. You can pick the sequence that you like on your own. I will also say this is where you will probably find a pincer sequence. Now the pincer sequence goes into the corner, and rather than connect like we've been doing in the past, this admittedly is the newer sequence where you play the underneath instead of the connection. The difference? It means you can't do this later on. We can't try to drag out the corner or stone anymore because we don't have the drop down to cut off this little guy. Predominantly, it's played the same way. Do beware of one thing if you're playing the new thing, however. In this variation, there used to be, this is a common move. Because you can go ahead, you can fight, we can get into cutting options here. But take note, when you play underneath, you might not really want to do that so much anymore because it leaves a whole bunch of cutting points you have to read out. So bear that in mind. But that's the only meaningful difference there. Easy, simple, great. Besides that, no new changes there. And believe it or not, that's the only sequences you really need to know for being approached onto the 4 nowadays. Back in the day, you could see this pincer, this pincer, this pincer, whole bunch of things like that. Those have pretty much all fallen to the wayside for the attachment or the tight pincer and pretty much nothing else. The only other variation you should be aware of is if you want to kick, you can kick. I don't recommend it, and I say that it's bad. The reason why I say it's bad is because it lets your opponent off very, very easy, but the AI only likes territory, so they're okay with it. I do not recommend it. If you want to, you can. You can see the kicking here is fine. You approach, you can kick, and do all this good stuff. Just note, the kick requires knowledge of invasion sequences. You have to be ready to reduce this if it gets too large. So if you're not aware of the invasion sequences, you probably want to leave the kick off. Because you can't allow your opponent to, for example, just like keep growing randomly and not know how to invade this area because it's potentially way too much territory. You do need to know how to invade and when to invade. So I don't recommend it, but you can play it. If you get kicked, just extend, get a base. And I suppose since we're talking about that, my continued preference for what happens if you get kicked and your opponent doesn't take the base. They don't fix themselves over here. Now the AI, this is going to be really bad. The AI is going to say play here and fight. But that's creating complication again. My preference is to play here and just get more influence on the outside. We might have this Joseki sequence where we sacrifice, or if they're paying particular attention to their shape, they might tap you here first and then do this one. Only difference between the variation that the AI wants, that where you pick two corners, hold up, where the AI, has you put yourself into two groups, and my preference where you stay one group, once again, it's 0.2. So do you have to play this one and create two separate groups and get into weird fights? You absolutely do not. Again, not my opinion. You're seeing it in green right in front of you. You do not have to do that. AI also wants you to do this again and then just like start getting into fight. If you want to do it, you can. Once more, AI puts you into two different groups. I still recommend this one. You are losing 0.6 points here, however, but it's still less than one whole point, so who really cares? You're staying connected. You have the influence. You've eliminated a lot of complication. You're nice and solid. Totally recommend doing that over creating two groups that have to live simultaneously and maybe giving your opponent a chance to counterattack. All right. Now, there's one more Joseki that has to be talked about when you play the 4-4. There's one more. Good old 3-3. Good old 3-3. Back in the day, we didn't 3-3. Why didn't we 3-3? Because, gosh darn it, it just gives so much influence away for not very much territory. And it's allowing your opponent to block in the direction that's best for them. So you're giving your opponent choice of direction. That hurts. You're making your opponent strong. That seems weird. We're not getting very many points from it. These three things all seem pretty bad. Seems pretty bad. Why would we want to do that? Seems pretty bad. Now, back in the day, we would absolutely play here. And then we'd play this sequence, and then maybe one of these sequences, and they'd settle, and everyone's happy. There we go. That's the Joseki we would pick. And it's probably terrible now, right? Because nowadays, the AI doesn't want you to do that. AI wants you to play here, and then take Sente and play away. So let's just set up something real quick.
Everything is just made better when you go in 3-3.
I agree. So just play away and do something. The problem with this is the modern sequence of playing to here and then tanuking gives your opponent the Atari into the descent. And the trouble with that is now the wall ain't looking so great. White can literally play a move like A and B because there's undercuts now. This isn't really all that settled. It's becoming an issue. And the territory that White is getting from this now is growing. Now it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and the outside 12, 14, 15 points from stealing your corner? That's weird. In the other variation that I probably can't find, yeah, in this variation, they've got, we don't really know yet, at least 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. They got like 9 points compared to 15. So they're close to doubling the amount of territory they have. And they can grow the top. But you get Sente. You're also going to under attack. Question is, how much worse is the old variation? How much worse is that old pesky variation? Let's go find out, chat. Okay, did we lose anything here? Okay, we lost 0.1. Okay, it looks like we lost 0.1 by blocking this way and the old way. And then... another 0.1 by extending. So, okay. So 0.1 and 0.1. Okay, we lose 0.2 points by playing this way. And this way, our opponent is fully surrounded compared to here, where they can grow. Because like right now, if we keep trying to grow this board, this is what White gets to do. They get to steal your corner and potentially start developing the outside on a really, really big way. So if you want to play the new way, you can. Just beware. Once again, creates complication. So in answer to the 3-3, I wholly recommend just playing nice and simple all the way up to professional level and just taking the solid thing. It's going to be a bit of a reoccurring theme with my recommendations. All right. Ba-doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop. Now, that said, if you want to go full-on modern, you will notice AI doesn't want this one anymore, does it? It wants technically the main line of this one. Why? Because after here, you can go expanding. And now, the variation that I mentioned here, where White gets to, you know, do this kind of thing and grow, is gone. It's completely impossible to do. Right? They can't grow if they can't build on that side. So if we play this, and then do this, and then do, I don't know, whatever else, who cares, and the Atari and extend down, there's no new place for them to grow. So that's, and the difference between that, as you saw, is a difference of like 0.1 points. So there you go. Do you have to play this way? No, you don't. Can you play the old way? Yes. You saw it in green. You absolutely can. Just know if you're White and you do this, don't play this way into this. It's technically not a good idea to make that exchange anymore. Because as you can see here, the exchange now lost a whole 1.3. So you ruined like the point, what was it, 0.2? What was it, 0.2, 0.3 points that you're gaining? Those 0.3 points that you're going after by playing the new way and not doing some lame outside approach stuff. Well, if you do play the Hane, you're gonna lose everything that you just tried to gain for yourself. because this is even more solid than it was previously. The thing with Joseki for SDK or Dudon is how to punish when the opponent goes off the Joseki. So the question is not that. The question is, what are you playing that they're playing off Joseki from? Like, they can't get to here, for example, then be like, I'm playing away. Like, I'm gonna play away now. Because, yeah, you get to follow up, and then their stones are gonna die. They're probably just dead in the corner now. That was just a weird thing to do, right? If they play here and you pincered, again, they can't really be like, I'm good. I'm gonna play away now. Because once again, they're getting into really, really bad ways. So the question is, what are you playing that allows them the option to play away, right? Do you need to know the attachment? The attachment is definitely not a thing. If you're attaching, you're weird. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. Because when you attach, you are creating a wall. So ideally, you want that wall to somewhere. Now here, it only says 0.3, but I actually view it as much worse. And here's why. If we play this, this sequence isn't completely defended yet. And if you defend it, your opponent's getting Sente. That's a very, very big thing. That's a very, very big thing. Because usually when you approach, whether you're doing this sequence, the person you approach gets Sente. Or whether or not you're doing this sequence, the person you approached gets Sente. When you do the attach, unless they have something that they can build from it, then they're gonna need to do something about that. Which means the person who did the approaching is getting Sente. And that is extremely rare for the person who did the approaching to get Sente from approaching the opponent. So that's a pretty big commitment, especially in the opening. Very, very big commitment. So if you're attaching, you need a really, really good reason. Yes, yeah, a Sanrin-sei thing, which is not meta right now. That would make sense because you're building a wall and the wall already has an extension. That, yeah, sure, that checks out. All right. Now let's say we don't do that. It's time to talk about the lovely 3-4, because I think that covers the 4-4. Not a whole lot of Joseki. Dang it, chat, when I was learning how to play, there were so many sequences that I needed to know. So many. You wouldn't believe it. This was common. This was common. This, in the answer to it, was common. So was this one, on a 4-4 bloody point. Yeah, that's right. That kind of stuff was common. Now, not really.